photographic moment. I'm back here in my house. Previously, when I did an episode, I was out in Hocking Hills, and now I'm back in doing a little bit of what I call macro photography. And the macro photography is getting very close in at very small subjects, flowers, insects, small, still life subjects, things like that. And today, what I have is an aquarium, and these are some fish. These are freshwater fish called African cichlids. They're very colorful fish. They're fun to photograph. They're really one of the better fishes to photograph. Types of fish to photograph are saltwater fish, but they're a little bit more difficult to keep. These guys are the next best thing. They're just as colorful as saltwater fish, and they have that kind of personality about them. A little bit more than your typical guppy or goldfish or something like that. They're fun to photograph. I've been doing this for a long time. In fact, it's one of the very first things I started photographing when I got involved in photography at a very early age. So, and even then I learned a little technique called indirect lighting, which works so well for this particular subject, but works for all types of macro photography work. It's where I take the flash and I direct the light where I want it to go, and I'm not limited by the flash on the camera. A lot of consumer-grade 35mm digital cameras have these little built-in flashes that pop up like this. They're great if that's all you have to work with. If you want to travel light, you're out traveling and just doing some snapshots of family subjects and things like that, they're fine. But if you're going to do professional lighting type photography, and especially macro work or something of that nature, you want to have an external flash that you can take off the camera and use and direct the light where you want it to go, instead of just being limited by the light going straight in one way and creating a lot of hard shadows behind your subject. If I were to use this type of flash for this type of photography, it just wouldn't work. The flash would go off, and it would hit that glass, reflect back, and end up with a big white blob, and maybe you could see a little fish behind it somewhere like that. So what's a better thing to use, I'm going to put this camera away. This is a Canon 50D. It's my backup camera. It's a very light camera I use to cover a lot of events. But for more photography like this, I go to my mainstay, which is the Canon 1D Mark III. And you'll notice this little device up here. It's a Canon STE2 transmitter. Now what this allows me to do is take the flash that sometimes goes on the camera, and this is a Canon 580EX. It's a great flash. I use it when I do event photography. It can angle the flash and direct the light where I want it to go. If I want to bounce it off the ceiling, which is really another way to diffuse the light, that's really good too. Also, if you notice this little plastic white cap I put over the flash, this diffuses the light as well. When I say diffuse it, it makes the light softer. It creates a nicer visual effect on the subject rather than the light hitting it direct on, and like I said, creating more of a contrast and hard shadows, and it just looks like a snapshot. And in professional photography, you want to do everything you can to avoid that. So it really works well in this situation, because what I can do in this aquarium is put this flash right up here like this. And what this does is cause the light, it goes down and hits the subject. Instead of the light going and hitting that glass and bouncing back, I'm having the light hit the subject and capturing it through the glass. Therefore, I don't have any type of reflection. I have the subject well illuminated, and it also darkens that background. And if I have time on this video, I'll go and do some flower photography too, and I'll do the same technique outside with flowers. It makes the flower nice, and that color nice and saturated. Everything's in focus on that particular macro subject, but the background will go dark, almost completely dark, which is really a nice effect for this type of work. On this camera is a 100mm Canon macro lens. It lets me get in about 2 to 3 inches, even closer, to very small subjects. Another thing that I do is I shoot an aperture priority, which means I set the aperture and the camera makes all the other adjustments according to the aperture. And why I like to do that is because it gets that one particular area of the subject in focus and gets everything out in the background blurry, because a lot of these plastic plants, I don't want in focus. I want the emphasis to be on the subject, the fish. The aperture I use is a very wide aperture, which is a low number like a 2.8 or somewhere like a 4 or 5, 6. I set that in a camera which adjusts the shutter speed. The shutter speed usually goes pretty slow, but I still, if you notice, I'm still doing handheld. I'm shooting at 1/8, 1/15 of a second, but there's no shakiness, because what's important to remember, what's causing the sharp area of the subject to be in sharp focus, the area to be in sharp focus is the light, is actually your focus. So, which is another advantage of using this type of flash. Okay, so I'm going to take a few shots here. Now, when I'm doing this, you'll notice that I'm turning the focusing ring, because I set the manual, the lens to manual focus. If you try to use autofocus, he's a nice guy. These guys are a lot of fun to photograph. If you use an autofocus with a macro subject, the closer you are in, the more fine detail that autofocus tries to follow. And with a subject that's always moving like this, that lens will not stop going in and out, trying to keep up with the subject. So it's much easier just to do manual focus. But these guys are really, really, neat, because they have different colors. They're not shy. In fact, they're kind of curious of what's going on, mainly because they think they're going to be fed, but it's okay. Another thing I try to do that's very important is when I'm focusing and tracking the subject, I try to always focus on the most important part of whether it be animal or people, and that's the eye. When people look at a photograph of an animal or a person, they don't even know it, but you're always gravitating toward the eye. That's where, we see the real personality of the person, and even, the fish or the dog or things like that. So I'll take a few more shots here, and hopefully I'll come up with some good ones. And like the other videos I've done, I will post them and at the end of the video, and you'll see how they turn out. So it's a lot of fun to do. It's just a little something, but to really make it work is a flash that you can use detached from the camera, where you can place that light where you want it to go, and also a macro lens to get close in, and you end up with some really neat subjects. This everyday things that are around the house are fun to photograph like this. If you have a garden, the flowers, especially this time of year, cut out with a macro lens and try using that flash and put it above and shooting downward. It really makes for a nice effect. So with that, I'm going to conclude the video, and thank you for watching another photographic moment, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.